Amara Hayes stood by the floor-to-ceiling window of her Marina District apartment, watching the Dubai sunset transform the sky into hues of orange and pink. She had achieved what many of her peers back in Los Angeles could only dream of, a prestigious position in one of the world's most luxurious cities. As she traced her reflection in the glass, Amara marveled at how far she'd come from her modest upbringing in the San Fernando Valley, born to middle-class parents. Her father, a high school teacher, and her mother, a nurse, had instilled in her a relentless drive for education and hard work. Amara had watched them sacrifice tirelessly, taking extra shifts to ensure she could attend the best schools. Their efforts bore fruit when she earned a full scholarship to UCLA's business school. During her time there, Amara distinguished herself not only with her academic excellence, but also with her groundbreaking ideas in digital marketing. Her thesis on luxury brand marketing in the digital age caught the attention of several international firms. When an offer arrived from Al Safar & Partners, Dubai's premier luxury marketing firm, Amara knew it was her ticket into the industry's upper echelon. The move to Dubai was a whirlwind of excitement and culture shock. The towering skyscrapers and limitless opportunities seemed to mirror her ambition. Within months, she had already made a name for herself by spearheading a digital campaign for a prestigious jewelry brand, driving an unprecedented 30% increase in online engagement. Her new apartment, though modest by Dubai's lofty standards, felt palatial compared to her old Los Angeles studio. Arranged by her company, it boasted sleek, modern interiors and breathtaking views of the marina, worlds away from the house where she had grown up. Amara swiftly adapted to the expatriate lifestyle, joining professional networking groups and building friendships with young professionals from around the globe. Her closest confidante was Sophie Reed, a British expatriate working in finance. Over coffee at their favorite marina cafe, Sophie had shared advice that stuck with Amara. Dubai operates on a different frequency. It's not just about what you know, it's about who you know. Amara took this to heart, attending every corporate event and networking opportunity. Her natural charisma and sharp intellect made her a standout in Dubai's elite social circles. Amara learned to navigate the delicate balance between Western openness and local cultural norms, always dressing and behaving with cultural sensitivity in the conservative business environment. It was at a high-profile luxury brands conference in September, hosted at the iconic Burj Al Arab, that her life took an unexpected turn. Amara had meticulously prepared her presentation on digital marketing trends in the luxury sector, and as she delivered her insights with poise, one attendee caught her eye. Sheikh Khaled bin Rahan Al Rashid, a renowned businessman in his late 40s, known for his investments in luxury retail, sat in the front row. His quiet nods of approval added gravitas to her words. The Al Rashid family wielded considerable influence in Dubai's business circles, and his presence alone elevated the conference's significance. After her presentation during the networking session, Sheikh Khaled approached her. "Miss Hayes," he said, his English polished with just a trace of an Arabic accent, "your insights on digital transformation in the luxury sector are truly remarkable." Dressed in a pristine white kandura, his commanding presence and neatly trimmed, graying beard exuded an air of authority. Amara felt a swell of professional pride at his compliment. "Thank you, Sheikh Khaled," she replied warmly. "I believe the Middle Eastern luxury market is uniquely poised to benefit from digital innovation." Their conversation flowed effortlessly, delving into business trends and the future of luxury retail in the region. That initial meeting paved the way for a series of professional interactions. Sheikh Khaled's company expressed interest in Al Safar and Partners' services, and Amara found herself increasingly involved in projects tied to his ventures. Her colleagues attributed her rising star to her creativity and professionalism. Amara's days soon filled with strategy sessions, client meetings, and high-profile events in Dubai's most exclusive venues. Invitations to elite gatherings where Dubai's affluent mingled with international business leaders became a regular part of her schedule. Her life seemed like a perfectly curated highlight reel of success, though she could not foresee the challenges that lay ahead. Amara Hayes' Instagram feed transformed from casual snapshots of marina sunsets and lively brunches to carefully curated images of her at high-profile events. Her parents, watching their daughter's ascent from afar, expressed both pride and a hint of worry. "You're living the dream, sweetheart," her mother remarked during their weekly video calls. "Just remember to stay grounded." Amara would laugh in response, reassuring them, "I'm still the same girl who helped Dad grade papers on weekends." Yet, beneath her confident smile, Dubai's intoxicating allure was beginning to reshape her perspective. The extraordinary wealth and luxury that once felt surreal quickly became normalized. Yacht parties, helicopter tours of the city, and dinners at Michelin-starred restaurants shifted from once-in-a-lifetime experiences to regular entries in her calendar. Amara's career at Al-Safar and Partners flourished alongside her lifestyle. By the end of the year, she was leading her own team, crafting digital strategies for some of the firm's most prestigious clients. Her office now occupied a coveted corner with sweeping views of the Burj Khalifa, and her salary had been significantly adjusted to reflect her growing responsibilities. The expatriate community celebrated her rise as a success story. Young professionals sought her advice on advancing their careers, and a feature in a local business magazine named her one of Dubai's rising stars in digital marketing. Invitations to exclusive speaking engagements across the Emirates followed, establishing Amara as a thought leader in her field. Sheikh Khaled's influence played an undeniable role in opening doors. His recommendations brought new clients to Al-Safar and Partners, enhancing Amara's reputation. If she noticed the lingering glances he gave her during meetings or how he seemed to single her out at events, she attributed it to professional respect. Sophie Reed, however, saw things differently. Over dinner at a rooftop restaurant one evening, Sophie voiced her concerns. "Amara, be careful with Sheikh Khaled. His attention might feel flattering, but don't forget where you are." Amara waved off her friend's worries, insisting, "It's strictly professional." But as autumn turned to winter, subtle shifts in Amara's life began to emerge. Her late-night strategy meetings grew more frequent, with urgent messages buzzing her phone at odd hours. Her once vivid social media posts became more reserved, curated to maintain an air of sophistication. Her collection of designer handbags and jewelry expanded, each piece justified as a necessary accessory in the luxury marketing world. Amara's wardrobe evolved, seamlessly blending elegance with cultural appropriateness, showcasing the very brands she represented. In retrospect, those early months in Dubai would feel like a dream, a glittering prelude to the events that would later shake the expatriate community to its core. For the moment, Amara was living her version of the Dubai dream, unaware that her rising star was tethered to a dangerous orbit. As December came to a close, Amara once again stood at her apartment window, gazing at the city's twinkling lights. Her phone buzzed with another message from Sheikh Khaled, requesting her presence at a late-night meeting. It was another opportunity to solidify her career, or so she believed. She replied with her usual professional courtesy, not realizing she was taking her first steps down a path that would lead to tragedy. The transition into this new world was so gradual that Amara barely noticed. January ushered in a string of high-profile events, each seemingly a natural extension of her growing success. Sheikh Khaled's connections granted her access to Dubai's most exclusive circles. She found herself drawn deeper into a lifestyle that far exceeded even her already comfortable expatriate existence. It began with an invitation to a private art exhibition at a members-only club in DIFC. The gallery featured rare Middle Eastern artworks, and Amara's presence was framed as part of a discussion on marketing strategies for the venue. Sheikh Khaled, dressed impeccably in his traditional kandura, ensured her name was on the guest list. "Art is about perspective, Miss Hayes," he said, standing close beside her as they examined an abstract piece. "Sometimes what we think we see isn't what's truly there." His words, enigmatic and weighted, lingered in the air like his cologne. Sophie noticed the changes first during their regular Sunday brunches. She remarked on Amara's new Van Cleef & Arpels bracelet, a piece that would cost several months' salary. "Business must be going well," Sophie said cautiously. Amara laughed it off. "It's important to look the part in this industry," she replied, her fingers unconsciously tracing the delicate gold chain. She didn't mention that it had mysteriously appeared on her desk one morning, accompanied by a note congratulating her on a successful campaign. The gifts kept coming, each more extravagant than the last: a Cartier watch after a major presentation, a Hermes handbag delivered after securing a high-profile client. Each had a professional pretext, yet Sophie's worried glances grew more frequent. Amara's calendar overflowed with exclusive events. Yacht parties gave way to invitation-only gatherings at lavish villas on Palm Jumeirah. Despite the glamorous veneer, the cracks in Amara's seemingly perfect life were beginning to show. Amara Hayes' Instagram posts, once spontaneous and casual, evolved into meticulously curated glimpses of a life steeped in luxury. High-profile events, designer outfits, and exotic locales filled her feed, transforming her into one of Dubai's rising social media influencers. Her follower count doubled, then tripled, as she gained recognition as a symbol of success in the city's elite circles. Her late-night strategy meetings became a fixture of her schedule, often at upscale restaurants like Zuma or Nobu. Sheikh Khaled would request her presence in private dining rooms, always under the guise of business discussions. These conversations began professionally but frequently veered into personal territory, exploring their pasts, dreams, and philosophies on success. "You remind me of myself at your age," Sheikh Khaled told her one evening in a secluded dining room at the Armani Hotel. That same hunger for success, that understanding that rules are meant to be bent. Amara smiled at the compliment, brushing aside the faint warning bells ringing in her mind. By March, the transformation in Amara's life was unmistakable. Her wardrobe was a parade of designer pieces, and her apartment had become a gallery of expensive art and rare artifacts, gifts she justified as business investments or tokens of client appreciation. Her salary at Al-Safar and Partners had increased significantly, but even that didn't fully account for her escalating lifestyle. Sophie Reed, worried by the changes in her friend, tried to intervene after Amara canceled plans for the third time in a row. "Amara, we need to talk about what's happening," Sophie said over the phone. "This isn't just about your career anymore, is it?" Annoyed, Amara ended the call abruptly. "I'm in control," she told herself. "This is just how business works in Dubai's luxury sector." The lines between personal and professional had blurred, and in this world, everyone knew it. The changes in Amara's social life were gradual but undeniable. She began missing regular brunches with friends and canceling weekly video calls with her parents. Her explanations grew vaguer, her responses to messages more delayed. The vibrant social circle she had built in her early months in Dubai faded, replaced by connections tied exclusively to Sheikh Khaled's world. Her office at Al-Safar and Partners became a secondary stop in her increasingly hectic life, overshadowed by high-profile events and late-night meetings. Her team adapted to receiving emails at odd hours, often sent from glamorous locations like the Burj Al Arab or private lounges in DIFC. Despite her continued professional success, her colleagues couldn't ignore her growing distraction and occasional anxiety. In April, things took a more troubling turn. Sheikh Khaled invited Amara to a private desert retreat framed as a business strategy weekend. The event was held at an opulent desert resort, far removed from Dubai's gleaming towers. Amara found herself the only woman in a small group of business executives, all closely connected to Khaled's enterprises. Under the vast starlit skies, the veneer of professional interest began to crumble. Khaled's attention became unmistakably personal, his touches lingering, his compliments becoming more intimate. Amara was both flattered and unnerved, aware she was crossing a line but unsure how to stop. Her behavior became increasingly erratic. At work, her once confident presentations turned mechanical, and her bold ideas gave way to cautious, conventional strategies. She constantly checked her phone, responding instantly to messages from specific numbers. In May, Sophie made one final attempt to reach her friend, showing up unannounced at Amara's apartment with their favorite takeout. The woman who answered the door was a shadow of the Amara she had once known, dressed impeccably in designer clothes, her makeup flawless, even at home, but with dark circles beneath her eyes that no amount of concealer could hide. "I'm worried about you," Sophie said, setting the food on the counter. "This isn't you, Amara. The gifts, the late nights. You're losing yourself." Amara's response was cold and practiced. "You don't understand the level I'm operating at now, Sophie. This is real business, not the middle management world you're stuck in." The words stung. driving Sophie away for good. The summer brought more changes. Amara moved into a larger, more exclusive apartment, claiming it was necessary for hosting clients. The lavishly furnished space reflected her elevated status, but during the rare video calls with her parents, they barely recognized the backdrop of her life. Sheikh Khalid's influence over her became all-encompassing. Through his assistant, he began dictating her schedule, sending cars to pick her up for late-night meetings that stretched into the early hours. The pretense of business grew thinner and the gifts more personal. A diamond necklace appeared in her apartment after she casually admired a similar piece in a magazine. The expatriate community began to notice. Whispers circulated at brunches. Amara no longer attended. Her former friends watched her Instagram posts, noting her proximity to Sheikh Khaled in photos, the way she seemed to orbit around him in the city's most exclusive venues. The isolation was complete, and Amara's once promising rise now cast long, troubling shadows. By August, Amara Hayes' life had become a meticulously choreographed routine of appearances and disappearances. She was frequently spotted at Dubai's most exclusive restaurants, always seated in private dining rooms, or entering high-end hotels for late-night meetings. On paper, her work at Al Safar and Partners remained exceptional, but her physical presence in the office had dwindled. The warning signs were visible to those who knew where to look. Amara startled easily at sudden noises. Her sleep became erratic, and the smiles on her social media posts appeared forced. But the opulent world she inhabited dismissed such concerns as envy or misunderstanding. By September, her public appearances grew sparse. Her last known sighting was at Atmosphere in the Burj Khalifa, wearing a yet-to-be-released crocodile skin handbag and a new designer dress. Those who saw her noted how tired she looked, her movements devoid of their usual confidence. The next day, her office at Al Safar and Partners was empty. Her team received a brief email stating she would be working remotely on an important project. Her once active social media accounts fell silent, save for occasional, carefully staged posts that projected an image of normalcy. Watching from afar, Sophie Reed felt a gnawing dread. The ambitious, genuine Amara she had once known seemed to have vanished, replaced by a ghost drifting through Dubai's elite venues, leaving behind whispers and unanswered messages. What no one knew then was that Amara had uncovered a darker truth. Documents, conversations, and patterns that didn't align had begun to reveal themselves. The luxury that had once captivated her was about to demand a steep price, and the shadows she had stepped into willingly were growing deeper and more menacing. The last message Sophie received from Amara was chillingly brief. "I might have made a mistake, but it's too late now." When Sophie tried to reply, the message had already been deleted, and Amara's phone went straight to voicemail. The first red flag came in October during a late-night review of marketing analytics. Amara, working alone in her apartment, noticed irregularities in the advertising budgets for luxury watch campaigns. The numbers didn't add up. Funds were inflated and routed through multiple offshore accounts before reaching their supposed destinations. At first, she dismissed it as complex financial structuring, a common occurrence in the luxury sector. But as she delved deeper, a pattern emerged. Companies linked to Sheikh Khalid's business empire were funneling money through convoluted channels, using marketing budgets as a front for larger, suspicious transactions. Her background in business allowed her to recognize the signs of potential money laundering. The realization hit her one sleepless night as she pored over spreadsheets. She had unwittingly become part of something far larger than luxury marketing. Sophie's earlier warning echoed in her mind. Be careful with Sheikh Khalid. Now, sitting alone in her opulent apartment surrounded by gifts that suddenly felt like chains, Amara began to grasp the true cost of her ambition. The first strange phone call came on a Tuesday morning. A distorted voice inquired about specific campaigns she had managed. When she demanded to know who was calling, the line abruptly went dead. Similar calls followed, always from different numbers, each asking about certain financial transactions. Other unsettling changes began to creep into her life. Black SUVs lingered outside her building for hours. Men in suits appeared at restaurants where she dined, sitting just close enough to ensure she noticed them. Her email account showed signs of unauthorized access from unknown locations. Paranoia set in, slowly but steadily. She began taking alternate routes to work, frequently checking her rearview mirror and avoiding her favorite cafes and restaurants. The luxury that had once felt like a protective cocoon now seemed like a gilded cage. One evening, while reviewing old campaign documents, Amara stumbled upon a folder she didn't recall creating. Inside were detailed records of financial transactions that made her blood run cold, evidence of systematic money laundering through luxury goods companies. Her name appeared on multiple documents as the marketing director responsible for the campaigns. The threatening messages started soon after. The first appeared on her phone during a meeting. Some discoveries are better left unmade. Amara's hands trembled as she deleted it, but the warnings continued. Loyal employees know when to look away. Your position comes with certain expectations of discretion. Though none of the messages were overtly threatening, their tone left no doubt about the danger she was in. Determined to protect herself, Amara began meticulously documenting everything. She saved screenshots, recorded dates and times, and stored the evidence in an encrypted folder on her laptop. She attempted to distance herself from Sheikh Khaled, declining late-night meetings and requesting to be removed from certain client accounts. She cited overwork, but her efforts were met with resistance. Your insight is invaluable to these projects, Sheikh Khaled would insist, his tone leaving no room for argument. Each refusal seemed to tighten the grip of the web she had inadvertently entered, drawing her further into a perilous game where escape seemed impossible. We need you involved. The words sounded more like a command than a request, growing more ominous each time Amara Hayes heard them. Unbeknownst to her, she wasn't the only one piecing together the puzzle. A private investigator, hired by a rival of Sheikh Khaled's business empire, had been quietly tracking suspicious money flows through various luxury companies. Amara's meteoric rise and her connections to several dubious transactions had placed her under scrutiny. From a distance, the investigator noted Amara's growing paranoia, the way she constantly checked over her shoulder, her hurried walks to her car, and her increasingly erratic schedule. She had the demeanor of someone who had uncovered something dangerous and regretted it. At work, her behavior became even more guarded. Amara started password protecting every file, even routine documents, and would immediately shut her laptop whenever anyone approached her office. Her previously open and approachable nature with colleagues had turned wary and distant. One night, while working late, she discovered her computer had been accessed during her lunch break. Files had been moved and sensitive documents opened. The cleaning staff reported seeing sharply dressed men claiming to be IT support in her office. That night, Amara stayed at her desk until dawn, copying all critical files and evidence to a secure external drive. The final warning arrived in the form of a gift, a stunning Cartier bracelet delivered to her apartment. The accompanying note read, "A reminder of the benefits of loyalty." Amara left the bracelet untouched in its box, the sinister undertones now painfully clear. Each gift had been a subtle tool of control. Determined to escape, she began planning her exit strategy. She transferred her most critical documents to encrypted cloud storage and started researching flights to Los Angeles, careful to use only her personal device and mobile data. She withdrew small amounts of cash from different ATMs to build an emergency fund. However, the obstacles to her freedom were formidable. Her work visa was tied to her position at Al-Safar and Partners. Her bank accounts had been inexplicably transferred to a private banking division with strict restrictions, and her lease contained hidden clauses that made early termination prohibitively expensive. A chance encounter at Dubai Mall brought Sophie Reed back into her orbit. Sophie barely recognized her friend. Amara, once confident and vibrant, now seemed skittish and shadowed. When Sophie approached, Amara avoided her gaze and walked away quickly, leaving her friend confused and deeply concerned. The pressure continued to mount. Amara found herself inexplicably included in meetings for projects she'd never heard of, and her signature appeared on documents she didn't recall signing. The web of financial transactions she had uncovered seemed to grow denser by the day. She began recording every interaction, saving conversations on her phone, and documenting every suspicious incident. One evening, Amara received a chilling call from an unknown number. A woman's voice, hurried and panicked, said, "You're not the first to notice. Others have disappeared. Get out while you can." Before Amara could respond, the line went dead. The next day, her office was searched again. Though nothing obvious was missing, Amara could tell someone had been through her files. The message was clear. She was being watched. Her fear escalated into constant anxiety. Every sound in her apartment made her jump. The luxury that had once symbolized her success now felt suffocating. Every security camera, every impeccably dressed man in her lobby, and every sleek, tinted car seemed to pose a threat. She tried to confide in her parents during their increasingly infrequent video calls, but the words wouldn't come. How could she explain that her dream job had turned into a nightmare, that her hard-won success was built on a foundation of criminality, that she feared for her life? The final straw came when she discovered her passport had been moved. Nothing else in her apartment was touched, but the implications were chillingly clear. Her ability to leave was no longer under her control. Amara began compiling a detailed dossier of everything she had uncovered: financial records, transaction histories, email threads, and photos of incriminating documents. She encrypted the files and stored them in multiple secure locations. She even set up a time-delayed email to send the evidence to authorities if anything happened to her. But as Amara would soon learn, even the most meticulous preparations are not always enough. The shadows she had glimpsed in Dubai's glittering world of luxury were deeper and darker than she had ever imagined. They were closing in. The last entry in her personal diary, found later, read, "I thought I was climbing the ladder to success, but instead I was descending into something I can't escape. If anything happens to me, look beyond the glitter and gold. The truth is in the numbers, the transactions, the patterns. I just hope someone finds it before it's too late." These would be her final words. The dangerous waters she had waded into were about to pull her under completely, leaving behind only questions and a trail of evidence that would one day expose the sinister underbelly of Dubai's luxurious facade. The last week of Amara Hayes' life began, like any other, amidst the gleaming opulence of Dubai's business district. Security cameras captured her leaving her luxury apartment building early Monday morning, dressed in a cream-colored Chanel suit and clutching a new Hermes bag. The timestamp read 7 a.m., October 5th. Her movements that day seemed routine, but the footage revealed subtle cracks in her composure. At her office in Al-Safar and Partners, she spent most of the day behind closed doors. Lobby cameras showed her glancing over her shoulder, her usual confident stride replaced by hurried steps. Her assistant, Priya Rahman, was the last person to have a significant conversation with her. She was different that day, Priya later told investigators. She asked me to clear her schedule for the rest of the week, saying she needed to focus on a special project, but her hands were shaking when she handed me her office key. Security logs later showed Amara entering the building's parking garage at 8:30 p.m. She sat in her car for 20 minutes before driving off, a delay that, in hindsight, seemed deliberate. Phone records revealed several calls made during this time to international numbers that investigators would later find untraceable. Tuesday brought a flurry of cryptic activity. CCTV footage tracked Amara across Dubai, first in Business Bay at 10 a.m., then at DIFC by mid-afternoon, and finally in the Dubai Marina that evening. At each stop, she appeared to be meeting someone, though cameras failed to clearly capture her companions. That evening, she made her final known phone call to Sophie Reed at 9:15 p.m. She sounded terrified, Sophie told the police. She kept saying she had evidence that could expose everything. When I asked her to explain, she just said, "If anything happens to me, check the cloud," and then hung up. The last confirmed sighting of Amara alive was on Wednesday evening. Security cameras at the Address Downtown Hotel showed her entering the exclusive restaurant at 8 p.m., wearing a sleek black Dior dress. Sheikh Khaled arrived 15 minutes later, and the two were seated in a private dining area beyond the view of cameras. What transpired during that dinner remains a matter of speculation. Amara left alone at 10:30 p.m., walking briskly through the lobby, her expression composed, but betraying no hint of the fate awaiting her. Her final text message, sent at 11:15 p.m. to an encrypted number, read, "It's done. I've uploaded everything. You know what to do if I don't check in tomorrow. Thursday morning brought the first signs that something was wrong, but Amara failed to show up for an important client meeting, a highly unusual lapse for someone known for her meticulous professionalism. Calls to her phone went straight to voicemail, and her apartment security system recorded no activity after Wednesday night. The first breakthrough came on Friday morning, when a maintenance worker at a supposedly vacant apartment in Business Bay made a grim discovery. The apartment, registered to a shell company, showed signs of recent occupation. Amara's designer handbag lay undisturbed on a marble coffee table, and her phone, wiped clean of data, rested beside it. The surfaces of the apartment had been meticulously cleaned, but ultraviolet lights revealed traces that told a different story. Security experts noted that the apartment's surveillance system had been disabled on Wednesday night. News of Amara's disappearance spread rapidly through Dubai's expatriate community. Her social media, once abuzz with daily posts, had fallen silent. Her last Instagram upload, a photo of the Dubai skyline at sunset, carried an eerily prophetic caption, "Some views are worth dying for." Investigators widened their scope, collecting security footage from hundreds of cameras across the city. A reconstruction of her final days revealed a chilling pattern. Amara moved like someone who knew she was being watched. Her office at Al-Safar and Partners became a secondary crime scene. Forensic teams discovered her computer had been accessed remotely in the hours following her disappearance, with several key files deleted. Cyber experts, however, remained confident they could recover the data. The disappearance of a young, successful executive shattered Dubai's carefully curated image as a safe haven for international professionals. The expatriate community, particularly young women in high-powered roles, was shaken. Sophie Reed painted a haunting picture of Amara's final weeks. She was scared. She changed all her passwords, started using encrypted apps, and told me she was protecting herself but wouldn't say from what. Days after her disappearance, the case took a darker turn. A desert patrol unit discovered Amara's car abandoned on a remote stretch of road outside the city. The vehicle had been wiped clean, but forensic teams found traces of evidence that would later prove crucial. 2 weeks after her last sighting, an anonymous tip led police to a grim scene in the desert. What they found ended any hope of finding Amara alive, but marked the beginning of an even larger investigation. The evidence she had painstakingly gathered would reveal a vast network of corruption and criminal activity concealed beneath Dubai's glittering facade. As Detective Hamid Ullah later reflected in his report, the death of Amara Hayes wasn't just about one person. It was about a system of secrets and lies hidden behind the glitter of luxury and success. Her encrypted dossier, eventually delivered to authorities, triggered a chain of events that would shake Dubai's financial sector to its core. For Sophie Reed and others who had known her, however, the truth offered little solace. Only questions about the devastating cost of ambition in a world where luxury and danger walked hand in hand. The final chapter of Amara Hayes' life had ended, but the story she uncovered was only beginning to unravel. The glittering towers of Dubai concealed dark secrets, and Amara had paid the ultimate price for exposing them. In the incident room, Detective Hamid Ullah stood before an evidence board that stretched across an entire wall. At its center was Amara's photo, surrounded by a labyrinth of documents, financial records, and surveillance images. 3 weeks had passed since the discovery of her body, and the case had evolved into one of the most complex investigations in Dubai's history. On his desk lay the forensics report, its findings meticulously detailed. What initially appeared to be a tragic but isolated crime had unraveled into something far more intricate. The autopsy suggested sophisticated planning and professional involvement, dismissing any notion of a crime of passion. "The financial trail connects everything," stated Sophie Chen, the forensic accountant assigned to the case. She gestured to a complex diagram of transactions involving luxury companies. Amara wasn't just managing marketing campaigns, she was inadvertently documenting a massive money laundering operation. Amara's encrypted files, triggered to release upon her failure to perform a weekly security check-in, had unveiled staggering revelations. Detailed records of financial transactions, disguised as marketing budgets, painted a clear picture of illegal activity. Each entry was meticulously documented with dates, amounts, and entities involved. Detective Ula's team combed through the evidence methodically. CCTV footage from Amara's final days revealed a chilling pattern. Black SUVs with tinted windows and luxury sedans with diplomatic plates repeatedly appeared in the background, maintaining just enough distance to avoid suspicion. Witness interviews portrayed a woman increasingly consumed by paranoia. She said the walls in her office had ears, her assistant Priya recalled. Amara had started holding meetings in the building's courtyard, far from potential eavesdroppers. A breakthrough came when forensic experts recovered fragments of messages from Amara's wiped phone. The texts revealed escalating threats. The system works because everyone plays their part. Loyalty is rewarded. Betrayal has consequences. Some questions are better left unasked. The financial analysis uncovered the operation's true scale. Amara's marketing campaigns had been used to launder hundreds of millions of dollars through a network of shell companies. Each transaction appeared legitimate, supported by fake invoices and contracts. She pieced it together in a way no one else could. Sophie Chen explained. Every transaction flagged corresponded to a seemingly valid campaign, but the numbers never aligned. She found the pattern hidden in plain sight. Amara had been quietly gathering evidence for months. Her encrypted cloud storage contained folders with timestamps dating back to her initial suspicions. She had cross-referenced financial anomalies with meetings, emails, and events, building a comprehensive timeline. Her meticulous documentation left little room for doubt. Footage from her final dinner at the address downtown hotel underwent intense scrutiny. While the private dining area was off camera, the lobby footage showed Amara leaving in visible distress. Her last phone call, made from the valet area, lasted a mere 15 seconds, leaving investigators to speculate about its contents. Forensic analysis of the Business Bay apartment where Amara was last seen revealed evidence that contradicted the theory of a single perpetrator. This wasn't a crime of opportunity, Detective Ula told his superiors. The level of planning, the systematic evidence cleanup, the financial complexity, this points to a professional operation with significant resources. The investigation uncovered parallels with other incidents in Dubai's luxury marketing sector. Young executives had either resigned abruptly or vanished under mysterious circumstances after managing certain accounts. None, however, had Amara's tenacity or attention to detail. The team's analysis of the shell companies involved revealed a tangled web of offshore entities. Each layer was constructed to appear legitimate, with proper documentation and plausible business purposes. Amara found what others either missed or chose to ignore, Sophie Chen remarked. She traced the money back to its origins, exposing a trail someone had gone to great lengths to hide. An unexpected lead came from a junior IT technician at Al-Safar & Partners who reported unusual access patterns to Amara's work computer in the weeks before her death. Technical evidence corroborated her suspicions, showing repeated unauthorized access. Her personal notes, recovered from encrypted files, revealed she had started keeping separate records to document her findings securely. The team constructed a timeline of events leading to Amara's death. 6 months, gathering evidence. 3 months, escalating threats. 2 weeks, active surveillance. Final days, increasing pressure, and the fatal dinner meeting. The investigation expanded internationally, as similar money laundering patterns were discovered in other luxury markets worldwide. She exposed a weakness in their system, Chen explained. By cross-referencing marketing budgets with actual advertising placements, she uncovered discrepancies that pointed directly to money laundering. Amara's meticulous documentation was devastatingly effective. Her understanding of digital marketing metrics allowed her to uncover irregularities others might have missed. She had mapped out an entire criminal enterprise hidden within the glittering facade of Dubai's luxury sector. As the case progressed, more witnesses came forward. Hotel staff, restaurant workers, and security personnel provided critical insights into Amara's final days. Each new piece of information painted a portrait of a woman who had discovered too much and paid the ultimate price for her courage. Each testimony added to the growing portrait of a young woman who had uncovered too much and paid the ultimate price. The investigation team meticulously built a case designed to withstand the intense scrutiny they knew would follow. With the power and influence of those implicated reaching into the highest echelons of society, every detail had to be flawlessly documented and verified. Amara did most of the work for us, Detective Hamidullah noted solemnly. She left us a roadmap. Our job is to follow it to its conclusion, no matter where it leads. The case file swelled to include thousands of pages of financial documents, hundreds of hours of surveillance footage, dozens of witness statements, complex financial analyses, detailed forensic reports, and international banking records. As the investigation reached its final stages, the team prepared to present their findings. The case Amara had painstakingly built, coupled with the evidence uncovered after her death, exposed a sophisticated criminal enterprise hidden behind the glittering facade of luxury marketing. Detective Ullah understood the challenge of bringing such a case to prosecution. The individuals involved wielded immense power, but Amara's meticulous documentation left no room for doubt. The irrefutable evidence of criminal activity on a massive scale made her work impossible to ignore. What began as the tragic death of one young marketing executive had evolved into an investigation that shook Dubai's financial sector to its core. Amara Hayes' legacy was more than the exposure of a sprawling criminal network. It was a catalyst for change in how luxury marketing transactions were monitored and regulated. As Detective Ullah prepared his final report, he paused to look at Amara's photo on the evidence board. Her story was more than a cautionary tale. It was a testament to the courage of one person willing to confront a corrupt system, even at the ultimate cost. The shockwaves from Amara's death reverberated throughout Dubai's expatriate community. The glittering promise of overnight success in the luxury sector darkened as young professionals began to scrutinize opportunities that seemed too good to be true. In the months following the investigation's conclusion, Al-Safar and partners underwent a comprehensive organizational overhaul. New compliance protocols were implemented, introducing strict oversight of marketing budgets and financial transactions. The firm became a model of corporate reform, though the transformation came at an unbearable cost. Amara's parents traveled to Dubai to collect her belongings. Their grief was palpable as they walked through her apartment. The luxury items that once symbolized her achievements now felt like hollow tokens of a system that had failed her. To honor her memory, they established the Amara Hayes Foundation for Corporate Ethics, dedicated to protecting young professionals in high-stakes industries. Amara's death wasn't just a personal tragedy, Sophie Reed declared during a memorial service held at the American University in Dubai. It was a wake-up call for our entire community. Hundreds attended, many seeing their own ambitions and vulnerabilities reflected in Amara's story. In response, the Dubai Financial Services Authority introduced new regulations dubbed the Hayes Protocols, which mandated greater transparency in luxury marketing transactions. These changes rippled through the global industry, prompting other financial centers to adopt similar measures to prevent the misuse of marketing budgets for illegal activities. Major luxury brands operating in the region revised their practices, bringing in independent auditors to review significant expenditures. The era of unchecked spending and opaque financial dealings came to an end, replaced by a culture of accountability and scrutiny. The expatriate community also underwent a transformation. Informal support networks emerged, with experienced professionals mentoring newcomers about the realities of working in Dubai's high-pressure sectors. WhatsApp groups and online forums became spaces for sharing red flags, creating a safety net that Amara had never had. Detective Ullah's final report catalyzed further reforms in corporate security. Panic buttons, secure communication channels, and anonymous reporting systems became standard in offices handling sensitive financial data. Universities across the region incorporated Amara's story into business ethics curricula. Her meticulous documentation and her bravery in standing against systemic corruption became enduring examples of integrity. The luxury marketing sector shifted its focus from extravagant growth to sustainability and transparency. Professionals were encouraged to ask questions about funding sources and client legitimacy, no matter how prestigious the partnership. Sophie Reed launched the Amara Hayes Memorial Lecture Series, drawing industry leaders and students alike to discuss corporate ethics and personal safety in the luxury sector. 1 year after Amara's death, a small garden was dedicated to her near the Dubai International Financial Center. A plaque read, "In memory of Amara Hayes, who sought truth at any cost. May her courage inspire others to stand for what is right." Amara's story marked the end of an era of unchecked excess in the luxury world, ushering in a new age of accountability and transparency. Though the price of these changes was devastatingly high, her courage ensured that those who followed would navigate a safer, more ethical industry. As Sophie often reminds young professionals during orientation sessions, true luxury isn't about expensive things. It's about being able to look in the mirror and know you've done what's right, no matter the cost. The sound of breaking glass would forever haunt 4-year-old Sophie Carter, etching an indelible memory of the night her mother died. But on that crisp January evening, she was merely a preschooler, entranced by how her spilled apple juice sparkled in the kitchen light. Her mother, Emma, then 28, was cleaning up the mess, unaware that in just a few months she would be at the center of San Francisco's most sensational murder investigation. Across the city, in a luxurious Palo Alto mansion, Dr. Nathaniel King stood in his private study, a glass of 18-year-old scotch in hand, reviewing the profile of Evergreen Academy's newest art teacher. Upstairs, his wife, Isabella, was sound asleep after another grueling 14-hour day managing her hospital department. Their children, Ethan and Mia, were lost in their teenage worlds, leaving Dr. King alone with his thoughts and his growing obsession. Emma's life had begun in the suburban quiet of Santa Clara, where she had always been the girl who saw beauty in the broken. Her father, David, worked as a mechanic, while her mother, Linda, ran a small florist shop. Money was tight, but they nurtured Emma's artistic talent. Their modest home became her first gallery, its walls covered in drawings and paintings that chronicled the dreams of a girl who painted in vivid hues. Emma's life took its first sharp turn during her senior year of high school when she fell for Ryan Davis, a charming basketball star. Their whirlwind romance led to a hasty marriage, which unraveled within months after Emma's pregnancy turned positive. By the time Sophie was born, Emma was a single mother with a newborn, an art degree from a community college, and a determination that would one day prove fatal. Dr. King's journey had been a stark contrast. Born into old money, he attended prestigious schools, married the right woman, and built a pediatric practice catering to Silicon Valley's elite. At 45, he epitomized success, a respected board member at Evergreen Academy, a father to 2 accomplished teenagers, and a husband to one of the Bay Area's most admired hospital administrators. But beneath the surface, a darker hunger gnawed at him, one his perfect life could never satisfy. Emma had crafted a modest but meaningful life. Her role as an art teacher at Evergreen Academy and her weekend art classes at the local community center provided just enough to maintain a small 2-bedroom apartment. Her home, filled with Sophie's finger paintings alongside Emma's vibrant canvases, radiated hope for brighter days ahead. Unbeknownst to everyone, not even her closest friend, Anna Lopez, who taught 3rd grade down the hall, Emma had begun keeping a journal. It was filled with sketches of a life she longed for, a loving partner, a home with an art studio, and the security to escape the constant paycheck-to-paycheck grind. Those hopeful strokes on paper would later contrast tragically with her untimely end. Meanwhile, Dr. King's public persona as a philanthropist masked his predatory behavior. Previous victims had been silenced with money or intimidation, their stories buried beneath his towering reputation. To the world, he was a paragon of the American dream. To Isabella, he was the increasingly aloof husband, with late nights that were always justified by medical emergencies or board meetings. To Ethan and Mia, he was a father whose approval always felt out of reach. That January evening marked the beginning of their fateful convergence. As Emma tucked Sophie into bed, reading Goodnight Moon for what felt like the 1,000th time, Dr. Fried King meticulously planned their encounter at the next day's school board meeting. String lights in Sophie's room danced shadows on the walls, while across town the crystal chandelier in King's study refracted light into sharp prisms as he scrutinized Emma's photograph. Later that night, Emma stepped onto her small balcony, sipping chamomile tea from her favorite chipped mug. The The city lights of Santa Clara twinkled below as she worked on a new painting, a swirling abstract of blues and golds, a piece that would remain forever unfinished. Meanwhile, Dr. King made one final phone call, ensuring his schedule was clear. In just hours, their paths would cross, setting off a chain of events filled with obsession, betrayal, and murder. Events that would devastate families, captivate the Bay Area, and leave a little girl motherless. But perhaps the most tragic aspect was how glaring the warning signs had been from the very beginning. His calculated precision, her yearning for a better life, and the inevitability of their two vastly different worlds colliding with catastrophic consequences. That January morning, destined to change everything, dawned crisp and clear in San Francisco. Emma Carter arrived early at Evergreen Academy, her arms laden with art supplies for the day's lessons. Her mind buzzed with creative ideas, leaving her oblivious to the sleek black Tesla parked in the reserved spot or the tall figure observing her from the second-floor boardroom window. Dr. Nathaniel King had orchestrated every detail. The quarterly board meeting had been scheduled to coincide with the art department's budget review, and he had ensured Emma would be the one presenting, suggesting to the principal that the new teacher needed opportunities to prove herself. What no one knew was that Dr. King had already spent weeks studying Emma from a distance. The boardroom was imposing, dark wood paneling, leather chairs, and portraits of past administrators looming from the walls. Emma stood hesitantly at the doorway, clutching her presentation materials. Her thrift store blazer suddenly felt painfully inadequate against the sea of tailored designer suits. That was when Dr. King made his move, appearing seemingly from nowhere. "Miss Carter, right?" His voice was warm, cultured, with a subtle southern charm. "I've heard wonderful things about your work with the children. Please, let me help you with those." The way he said her name, as though it were something precious, would linger in her mind for weeks. Investigators would later remark on how meticulously orchestrated this first meeting had been. The other board members were conveniently running late, giving Dr. King precious minutes alone with Emma. He used every second to ask her about her teaching philosophy, compliment her innovative ideas, and make her feel like the most fascinating person in the room. "You have a daughter, don't you?" he asked, though he already knew everything about Sophie. "My practice specializes in pediatrics. Children are such a blessing." The mention of his prestigious Palo Alto practice was casual but deliberate, a subtle reminder of the vast social gulf between them. Emma's presentation went better than she could have imagined. The other board members were distracted, their attention split between emails and shuffled papers, but Dr. King never wavered. His dark eyes remained fixed on her, his support unwavering. When Emma mentioned needing new supplies for an upcoming project, he was the first to voice his approval. "I believe investing in the arts is essential," he said, his commanding tone silencing the room. "Miss Carter clearly has the vision we need at Evergreen." Her budget was approved, just like that. Emma didn't notice how effortlessly the other board members deferred to him or how his influence shaped the room's decisions. The real turning point came after the meeting. As Emma gathered her materials, Dr. King casually mentioned heading to the kindergarten wing, where Sophie attended the school's early childhood program. "Would you like to walk with me?" he asked smoothly. "I'd love to hear more about your ideas for the spring art show." Their walk down the corridor, later captured on school security cameras, showed Dr. King gesturing animatedly while Emma's nerves melted away, replaced with growing enthusiasm. They paused outside Sophie's classroom where the children were engaged in playtime. "That's my daughter," Emma said proudly, pointing through the window at Sophie, who was organizing a game with the confident leadership Emma often wished she possessed herself. Dr. King's gaze softened as he observed Sophie. "She has your creative spirit," he remarked, "and your eyes." The personal comment made Emma blush, though she couldn't have explained why. It was during that moment, as they watched Sophie play, that Dr. King made his next calculated move. "You know, my daughter Mia used to love art at Sophie's age," he began, his voice tinged with nostalgia. "She's a teenager now. They grow up so fast. I've been thinking about getting her back into it. Would you consider giving her private lessons? The school rate for outside services is quite generous." The offer was flawless. It provided Emma with the extra income she desperately needed while establishing a legitimate reason for ongoing contact, subtly beginning the process of entwining their lives. When Sophie noticed them and ran to the window, waving excitedly, Dr. King responded with a grandfatherly warmth. "Hi, Dr. King," Sophie called through the glass. She knew him from his visits to her classroom for routine health checks, a detail he had carefully orchestrated. "Are you my mommy's friend?" Sophie asked innocently. "I hope so," Dr. King replied, smiling at both mother and daughter. "I certainly hope so." That evening, as Emma drove home with Sophie chattering in the back seat, she felt a glimmer of hope she hadn't known in years. The prospect of extra income would help with bills, but more than that, she felt seen, truly seen for the first time since her divorce. She didn't notice Sophie's casual comment that Dr. King had already visited her classroom 3 times that month, or think to question why a busy pediatrician would take such an interest in a kindergarten art program. Back in his Palo Alto office, Dr. King was logging details into a private file on his encrypted laptop. Beside Emma's staff photo, he added a new entry. First direct contact successful. Subject responsive to attention and professional validation. Daughter provides excellent point of connection. Below, he began plotting the next phase of his deliberate seduction. Within days, expensive art supplies began arriving at Emma's classroom. Each delivery came with a handwritten note on Dr. King's monogrammed stationery praising specific aspects of her teaching. To her colleagues, it appeared to be nothing more than professional mentorship. To Emma, it felt like magic. To others, it appeared as simple professional mentorship from a generous board member. But to Emma, it felt like magic. Finally, someone who truly understood her passion for teaching and saw her untapped potential. The school's security cameras began to document their interactions with growing regularity. A conversation in the parking lot that lingered longer than necessary, a lunch meeting in her classroom to discuss Mia's upcoming art lessons. Experts would later analyze Dr. King's body language in these moments. The subtle way he leaned in when Emma spoke, the brief touch of his hand on her arm or shoulder, and how he consistently positioned himself between Emma and any male staff members who approached. One person, however, noticed something off. Anna Lopez, who taught 3rd grade, grew increasingly uneasy about how often Dr. King found reasons to visit Emma's classroom. "Be careful," Anna warned her friend one morning over coffee. "There's something about him that doesn't sit right with me." Emma dismissed the concern with a laugh. "He's married, Anna, respected, far above my social circle. What could possibly be inappropriate about him helping me?" What Emma couldn't know was that in his private study that evening, Dr. King was crafting a text message that would escalate their relationship to the next level. It was an invitation to discuss her career over dinner at an exclusive Nob Hill restaurant, a venue he knew his wife and her social circle would never frequent. As he typed, he glanced at the growing file on Emma Carter stored on his encrypted laptop. It now contained details about her financial struggles, her daily routines, and, most significantly, her evident longing for a better life. The stage was set, the players in position, and the tragedy was already in motion. Emma Carter, finishing her final class of the day, had no inkling she was the target of a dangerous obsession. Instead, she was simply excited to check her phone, hoping for a message from the distinguished doctor who had shown such interest in her career. Within hours, the message would arrive, marking the beginning of a path that would irrevocably alter her life. By early February, Emma's world had transformed in subtle yet profound ways. The first-year art teacher who once scraped together supplies from dollar stores was now surrounded by premium materials, all donated by Dr. Nathaniel King. Her once-empty classroom calendar was brimming with private lessons for his daughter, Mia, each session scheduled for times he could conveniently attend. The security cameras at Evergreen Academy silently chronicled the evolution of their dynamic. The changes began with small, seemingly thoughtful gestures. A leather portfolio left on her desk one morning, far beyond what her salary could afford. The note accompanying it read in Dr. King's elegant handwriting, "Every professional needs proper tools." When Emma tried to return the gift, Dr. King waved away her concerns with practiced charm. "Consider it an investment in our students' future," he said with a smile that left her feeling both flattered and unsteady. Their first dinner meeting took place at Le Chateau, an exclusive French restaurant in Nob Hill, where valet parking alone cost more than Emma's weekly grocery bill. She agonized over her outfit before settling on an old black dress she had once worn to a cousin's wedding. When Dr. King arrived in his Tesla, effortlessly elegant in a custom suit likely worth more than her monthly rent, he greeted her with a disarming compliment. "You look stunning," he said, helping her out of her car with an old-world courtesy she had only seen in movies. The maitre d' greeted him by name, escorting them to a private corner booth. "I took the liberty of ordering wine," he said, as a server appeared with a bottle of Chateau Margaux. Emma, unfamiliar with fine wines, didn't realize it cost more than her monthly income. Although the meeting was ostensibly about the spring art show, the conversation quickly turned personal. Dr. King asked about her dreams, her challenges as a single mother, and her hopes for the future. He listened with an intensity that left her feeling truly heard for the first time in years. "You have extraordinary potential, Emma," he said, using her first name for the first time. "You just need someone to help you realize it." His words, part promise and part prophecy, sent a shiver through her, a sensation she mistook for excitement. Over the following weeks, Anna watched her friend's transformation with growing unease. Emma's newfound confidence came with subtle but troubling changes. "Don't you think it's strange?" Anna asked during one of their coffee meetups. "The gifts, the attention, he's old enough to be your father." Emma dismissed her concerns with growing irritation. "He's just being kind," she insisted. "Besides, he's married. It's completely professional." But what felt like kindness to Emma was something far more calculated. Dr. King's growing control over her life was only beginning to take shape. "The gifts, the attention. He's old enough to be your father," Anna pointed out, her concern evident. But Emma defended him with unwavering resolve. "He's just being kind," she insisted. "Besides, he's married. It's completely professional." Yet there was nothing professional about the way Dr. King's eyes lingered on Emma as she walked through the school hallways. Security footage would later reveal his growing possessiveness, the way he appeared whenever male teachers or parents spoke to her, his hand resting on her lower back as he guided her through doorways, and how their conversations gradually shifted from public spaces to the seclusion of her classroom. The power dynamic shifted imperceptibly but steadily. When Emma casually mentioned her struggles with car payments, Dr. King quickly arranged for a school transportation grant that conveniently covered her bills. When Sophie needed new winter clothes, packages from designer children's boutiques mysteriously appeared in Emma's classroom. Each gift came with invisible strings that pulled her deeper into his web. Text messages later recovered by investigators would show the slow, calculated transformation of their relationship. Early exchanges about lesson plans and school events evolved into late-night conversations about art, life, and loneliness. Dr. King played his role to perfection, the successful but wistful mentor who saw in Emma a kindred spirit. "Sometimes I feel so isolated," he wrote one night. "Isabella is brilliant, but she doesn't understand art like you do. She doesn't see the world's beauty the way we do." The message arrived at 11:43 p.m., long after his wife had gone to bed in their Palo Alto mansion. Emma's response revealed her growing emotional dependency. "I know what you mean," she texted back. "It's like no one else really sees me. Except you." She didn't notice how his messages always arrived when she was most vulnerable, late at night after Sophie had fallen asleep, when the quiet of her apartment felt overwhelming. By March, Dr. King had woven himself into nearly every facet of Emma's life. He knew her schedule, her finances, her dreams, and her fears. He attended every school event she was part of, always present in a way that felt both supportive and supervisory. If another man approached her, Dr. King found ways to interrupt or subtly intimidate without drawing attention. Her classroom was soon filled with professional-grade art supplies, her wardrobe upgraded with gift cards to expensive boutiques that appeared in her mailbox, and Sophie's preschool tuition suddenly covered by a school board scholarship. Each gesture seemed generous, but it only served to make Emma more dependent on him, more grateful, and more blind to the sinister motivations behind his actions. In his private study, Dr. King's obsession deepened. His encrypted laptop was filled with hundreds of photos of Emma, teaching, laughing with students, walking with Sophie. He had recordings of their conversations, copies of her schedule, and meticulous details about her daily life. While his wife worked late at the hospital and his teenage children pursued their own activities, he spent hours strategizing his next move. The school's annual fundraising gala in late March marked a significant turning point. Emma arrived in a designer dress, a deep blue silk gown that had appeared in her classroom earlier that day. It made her look both sophisticated and vulnerable. Dr. King had orchestrated every detail from her seating arrangement at his table to the precise moment he would ask her to dance. "You look absolutely breathtaking," he whispered as they moved across the dance floor, his hand resting on her waist with a possessiveness that was impossible to ignore. His eyes never left her face. From across the room, Isabella King observed the interaction, her instincts prickling with an unease she couldn't yet articulate. Later that night, Dr. King made his first critical mistake. Insisting on driving Emma home because she had consumed champagne, he let his carefully constructed mask slip. In her building's parking lot, he stood too close, his hand lingering on her arm. Then he leaned in as though to kiss her. Startled, Emma stepped back. "Dr. King, Nathaniel, I think there's been a misunderstanding," she said, her voice shaky. But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't entirely true. The chemistry between them had been building for weeks, every gift and conversation drawing them closer to this moment. "No misunderstanding," he said softly, though his tone carried a weight of certainty. "But you're right. This isn't the time. Not yet." He left her there, confused and slightly afraid, though she couldn't explain why. That night, alone in her apartment, Emma tried to convince herself she was imagining things. After all, he was married, a respected man far above her social standing. What could he possibly want with someone like her? In his study, Dr. King was already strategizing the next phase. The misstep in the parking lot had revealed the need for greater caution. His laptop screen glowed with meticulous new entries. Subject showing signs of resistance. Increase isolation from support network. Accelerate financial dependence. The next morning, a stunning bracelet arrived at Emma's apartment, a delicate piece of white gold and diamonds, easily worth thousands. The accompanying note read simply, "For an extraordinary woman, no strings attached." But there were always strings, and they were tightening inexorably around Emma Carter's life. By the end of March, the transformation was complete. The once independent young teacher now turned to Dr. King for guidance in nearly every decision. Her friends had drifted away, unable to compete with the glamorous world he offered. Even Anna had stopped voicing her concerns, resigned to the distant, glazed expression Emma wore whenever Dr. King's intentions were questioned. What no one realized was that they were witnessing the construction of a carefully designed trap. Every gift, every conversation, every coincidental gesture was methodically documented in Dr. King's private files. He was crafting a narrative of mutual attraction and willing participation, a story that could later be used against Emma. The school's security cameras captured it all. Lingering touches, private conversations, and the subtle shifts in Emma's body language growing both more comfortable and more submissive. The power dynamic had shifted completely. Dr. King now controlled every aspect of Emma's life, her financial decisions, her career moves, even her daily schedule, though she remained unaware. The trap was set. The prey was dependent. The predator was poised to strike. What Emma didn't know, nor did anyone else, was that she wasn't the first young teacher to captivate Dr. King. Hidden away in a locked drawer of his desk alongside his curated facade of respectability was a small black book. Inside were names and dates spanning years, each representing a life he had manipulated and destroyed. It was a pattern about to repeat itself with devastating consequences. April arrived with unseasonably warm weather, and with it, the first irrevocable boundary crossed in Emma's relationship with Dr. King. What seemed like an innocent professional development opportunity, a prestigious art education conference in Santa Barbara, had been meticulously arranged by him, from the hotel bookings to the schedule. Their first kiss occurred in the elevator of the hotel, a fleeting moment caught by security cameras that would later become crucial evidence. Dr. King had spent the evening praising Emma's contributions at the conference, making her feel brilliant and sophisticated. When his lips met hers, she didn't pull away. Later, she would describe the moment to investigators as feeling like stepping into a dream she didn't want to leave. Back in San Francisco, Sophie was spending increasing amounts of time with her grandparents on weekends. "Mommy has special teacher meetings," Emma explained, her words leaving a bitter taste. But the bitterness was easily ignored when Dr. King whisked her away to luxury hotels in nearby cities like San Diego, Palm Springs, and Santa Barbara, each trip carefully disguised as professional development. Every detail was arranged to maintain their secrecy. "Uncle Nathaniel got me a new art set," Sophie announced one day at preschool, her innocent words raising eyebrows among teachers. The gift, an expensive set of supplies, had arrived on her birthday with a note praising her artistic talent. Dr. King was embedding himself into Emma and Sophie's lives with calculated expertise, stepping into the father figure role Sophie had never known. "He knows all about children," Emma would say defensively when Anna voiced concern. "He's a pediatrician, after all." May brought warm evenings spent in hidden corners of exclusive restaurants where Dr. King's influence ensured their privacy. His wife, Isabella, was consumed with her work at the hospital, and his teenage children were preoccupied with their own lives. When Emma occasionally expressed guilt, Dr. King's responses were rehearsed to perfection. "Isabella and I haven't really been married for years," he would say, his tone carrying just the right note of melancholy. "We stay together for the children, for appearances, but there's no love left." Then he would take Emma's hand, his touch banishing her moral doubts. "What we have, this connection, I've never felt anything like it." The security footage from Evergreen Academy, however, told a different story. It revealed Dr. King's increasing possessiveness, how he appeared whenever male teachers approached Emma, how his hand on her lower back became more proprietary, and how their conversations moved from classrooms to more secluded areas of the school. The cameras also captured subtle changes in Emma. The way she constantly checked her phone, how she jumped whenever a door opened, her growing isolation from other staff members. Text messages later recovered by police revealed the extent of Dr. King's control. "That new art teacher seems friendly, perhaps too friendly. Just looking out for you, dear. Men like that often have ulterior motives. Wear the blue dress tomorrow. It suits you better than the red one." Each message was cloaked in concern, but the control was unmistakable. By June, Emma was living in what felt like a dream. Dr. King had arranged for her to teach summer art classes at an exclusive private program, doubling her income. Her apartment was now adorned with original artwork he had purchased, her closet filled with designer clothes that arrived as surprise gifts, and Sophie attended an expensive summer camp, all mysteriously covered by a school board initiative. What Emma failed to see was how her world had shrunk. Her Friday coffee dates with Anna were a distant memory. Calls from her parents often went unanswered. Even her beloved community art classes had been abandoned in favor of private lessons with wealthy students, Dr. King referred to her. "I just want to protect you," Dr. King would say, his deep voice laden with false concern. "The world can be cruel to talented, beautiful women like you." And with every gesture of protection, the walls of Emma's cage grew higher. He would say, his deep voice full of concern, "The world can be cruel to talented, beautiful women like you." Each warning came wrapped in a gesture of protection. A new car because her old one wasn't safe enough, a sophisticated security system for her apartment, or a private driver for evening events. By July, the cracks in their carefully maintained facade began to show. Isabella King, suspicious of her husband's frequent absences, hired a private investigator. "Doctor?" King's response was immediate and calculated. He arranged for Emma to attend an art education program in San Francisco, creating physical distance while he worked to neutralize the threat. "It's an amazing opportunity," he insisted, his tone brooking no argument. "Sophie can stay with your parents. Everything's arranged." What Emma didn't know was how meticulously he had orchestrated her acceptance into the program and ensured her daughter's care would keep her tethered to him. Each step isolated her further. Alone in a luxury hotel room paid for by the school board, Emma sketched the life she imagined. A beautiful home, Sophie growing up with a father's love, and a family bound together by art and affection. Detectives would later find these drawings in her journal, noting how Emma's identity had begun to fade within her imagined future. Every dream she depicted relied on Dr. King's presence. August brought the first significant clash. Emboldened by wine during a quiet dinner, Emma finally broached the topic she had avoided for months. "When will you tell Isabella? When can we stop hiding?" Dr. King's reaction was subtle but chilling, a flash of anger quickly masked by practiced concern. "Darling, we've talked about this," he said, his voice soft but firm. "The timing has to be right. Think about the children, all of them. Besides, would you want people to think you're the kind of woman who breaks up a marriage?" The words were gentle, yet the threat was unmistakable. That night, alone in her apartment, Emma cried herself to sleep, unable to explain the heavy ache in her chest. By September, 6 months had passed since their first kiss. Dr. King celebrated by whisking Emma away to a private villa in Montecito. The property was registered to a corporation and reserved under a false name. Everything about the weekend was perfect, controlled, secret. Back in Palo Alto, Dr. King maintained a meticulous record of their relationship in his private study. Every gift, every trip, every text message was documented and dated. He had photos, receipts, and recordings. A carefully curated collection that could either validate their love or ruin Emma's reputation, depending on his needs. The new school year brought whispers despite their precautions. Staff began noticing the way Dr. King's hand lingered on Emma's shoulder during board meetings, her increasing absence from social events, and the steady stream of expensive art supplies appearing in her classroom. No one dared speak openly. His influence was too powerful, his reputation too untouchable. As autumn settled in, Emma found herself living two separate lives. In one, she was a devoted teacher and mother, reading bedtime stories to Sophie and creating art with her students. In the other, she was Dr. King's secret passion, swept into a world of luxury and promises she had never imagined. She didn't realize that both lives were choreographed performances, directed by a man whose obsession was spiraling into something dangerous. The security cameras at Evergreen Academy continued recording moments that would later piece together a tragedy. They captured Dr. King's growing boldness, Emma's increasing dependence, and the way their secret was becoming harder to conceal. But by the time anyone reviewed the footage, it would be far too late. October revealed the first signs of Dr. King's obsessions slipping into dangerous territory. The catalyst was simple. Daniel Chen, a new physical education teacher, casually asked Emma to join the Halloween party planning committee. Security footage showed Dr. King watching their interaction from the second-floor window, his knuckles white against the frame. Within hours, Daniel received an email transferring him to another school in the district. The official reason cited staffing adjustments, but the message was clear to anyone paying attention. Dr. King's influence had become almost absolute. Emma's social media accounts, once filled with cheerful posts about her art projects and teaching moments, began to change. Photos featuring male colleagues vanished mysteriously. Her Instagram, now monitored obsessively by Dr. King through a fake account, became a curated display of only the images, outfits, and activities he approved. "That dress isn't appropriate for a teacher of your caliber," he would say, his voice laced with authority and concern. By the next day, a new wardrobe of expensive but conservative clothing would appear in her classroom, transforming her from a vibrant 28-year-old into someone else's idea of a proper educator. Each gift came with an implicit requirement: wear it, embrace it, accept the control. The financial web tightened further. The lease on her new car, the upgraded apartment he had insisted on for Sophie's safety, and the private school tuition he had arranged for her daughter, all the generosity now revealed itself as chains. When Emma mentioned taking on extra art classes to supplement her income, Dr. King's reaction was swift and fierce. "Why would you need that?" he demanded, his calm demeanor cracking slightly. "Haven't I provided everything you need?" His voice turned sharp, almost dangerous. "Unless," he added coldly, "there's someone else encouraging this independence." The threat was unmistakable. November brought the first physical manifestation of his anger. When Emma stayed late for a parent-teacher conference with a single father, she returned to her car to find the tires slashed. Conveniently, the security cameras in the parking lot had malfunctioned during that time. The next day, Dr. King insisted on providing Emma with a private driver, citing her safety as the reason. The school's Thanksgiving festival became yet another battlefield. Emma, having volunteered to help with decorations, often worked alongside other teachers after hours. Every evening, Dr. King appeared, his presence equal parts threatening and protective. "Just checking on my favorite teacher," he would say with a smile, but his eyes tracked her every move, noting every interaction and every smile exchanged with male colleagues. By December, Emma began to see the bars of her gilded cage more clearly. The expensive gifts, financial support, and professional opportunities all came with strings attached. Yet the thought of losing it all, of returning to the struggles of single motherhood, terrified her more than Dr. King's increasingly erratic behavior. The holiday season brought new tensions. At the school's Christmas party, Isabella King made a rare appearance. From across the room, Emma watched as the polished couple worked the crowd with practiced ease. Her stomach churned with guilt and longing. Later that night, back in her apartment, Dr. King's carefully maintained composure cracked. Furious over his wife's flawless public performance, he knocked over a vase in anger. "You're mine," he whispered afterward, helping her clean up the shards of glass. "Only mine." The words should have terrified Emma, but by then she was too ensnared in his web to see them as the threat they were. The school security cameras documented the shifting dynamic between them. Once filled with lingering touches and secretive smiles, their interactions now held tension. Conversations moved to secluded corners, Emma's body language increasingly defensive, and Dr. King's presence growing more aggressive. The footage showed him appearing suddenly whenever male teachers or parents approached her, a silent but clear warning. January brought a new semester and heightened control. Under the guise of enhancing her security, Dr. King installed a tracking app on Emma's phone. He began showing up unannounced at her apartment with plausible excuses about school business or Sophie's well-being. His gifts became increasingly extravagant and controlling. Designer clothes accompanied by notes specifying when to wear them, jewelry that marked her as his possession. The breaking point came when Emma attempted to attend her college roommate's wedding. Dr. King's reaction was swift and severe. He manufactured a school crisis that demanded her presence, threatened to withdraw Sophie's tuition support, and finally resorted to direct threats about her job security. "Do you really think you'd still have your position without my support?" he asked, his voice soft but menacing. "Do you think anyone else would want you, knowing what we've done?" The questions hung in the air like poison, and Emma felt the last illusion of choice slip away. In his private study, Dr. King's obsession reached its zenith. His encrypted laptop housed thousands of photos of Emma, teaching, shopping, walking Sophie to school. He had recordings of her phone calls and copies of her emails and detailed notes about every aspect of her life. Isabella, too consumed by her work at the hospital, never entered this room and never discovered the shrine her husband had created. Security footage from these final weeks revealed Emma's decline. Once confident and vibrant, she appeared thinner, jumpier, her stride hesitant. Dr. King's growing physical presence was palpable, his hand gripping her arm just a little too tightly, his body blocking her path when she tried to walk away, his face darkening when she spent too long talking to someone else. What the cameras couldn't capture was Emma's growing fear. At night, she lay awake, haunted by how she had become so dependent and so controlled. Her journal entries from this period, later found by detectives, revealed her mounting awareness of the danger she was in, tempered by her paralyzing fear of losing everything she had gained. The final entry, dated just weeks before her death, read, "I don't know who I am anymore. Everything I have, everything I am, belongs to him. But what happens if I try to leave? What happens to Sophie? To my job? To me?" She would soon get her answer, though not in the way she could have imagined. As January drew to a close, the pressure built toward an inevitable explosion, one that would shatter the illusion of Dr. Nathaniel King's perfect life and leave a little girl motherless. On a cold February morning, a pregnancy test sat on Emma's bathroom counter like a ticking bomb. 2 pink lines confirmed what she already suspected. For a moment, Emma stood frozen, her hand instinctively moving to her stomach, caught between hope and terror. Sophie was at school, the apartment silent except for the hum of the expensive security system Dr. King had insisted on installing. Emma's first call wasn't to him, it was to her mother. Tears and confusion spilled out, breaking months of strained silence. Her second call was to her doctor, confirming what the 3 tests she'd taken that morning already told her. Only then, her hands trembling, did she text the man who had consumed her life for the past year. "We need to talk. It's important." At Rosewood Elementary, security cameras captured Dr. King's reaction to the message. Sitting in a board meeting, his phone lit up, and for the briefest moment, his perfect composure slipped. Within minutes, he excused himself, citing a medical emergency. They met in their usual place, a luxury hotel suite he kept permanently reserved. Housekeeping would later report overturned furniture and shattered glass. But at that moment, Emma arrived full of desperate hope. She had spent the drive envisioning a future, a real family, no more hiding, a life where she didn't have to share the man she loved with someone else. "I'm pregnant," she announced as soon as he opened the door. For a fleeting second, she saw something dark flash across his face before his doctor's mask slipped into place. His response was immediate and clinical. "We'll take care of it," he said, already reaching for his phone. "I know a discreet clinic." The force of Emma's response surprised them both. "I'm keeping it, and you're going to leave. Isabella." The security footage from the hotel corridor would later show Dr. King entering the suite at 9 p.m., looking composed. At 9:30 p.m., the cameras caught the sound of raised voices. At 9:45 p.m., a crash that brought concerned calls to the front desk. Inside the suite, years of care and manipulation were unraveling. "You can't do this to me," Dr. King raged, his cultivated charm cracking to reveal something darker beneath. "Do you have any idea what this would do to my reputation, my practice, my family?" For the first time, Emma saw him clearly, not as the sophisticated mentor and lover who had swept her off her feet, but as a controlling married man who had systematically isolated her from everyone she loved. The realization hit her like a physical blow. "Your family?" she repeated, one hand protectively over her stomach. "What about my family? What about Sophie? What about this baby?" His laugh was cold, unfamiliar. "Be realistic, Emma. What did you think was going to happen? That I'd leave my wife of 15 years for a school teacher young enough to be my daughter? That we'd play happy family with your bastard child?" The cruelty of his words cut through the last of her illusions. In that moment, every warning she'd ignored, every red flag she'd dismissed, came rushing back. The way he controlled her, her clothes, her friends, her money, the mysterious problems that befell any man who showed interest in her, the tracking app on her phone that she'd accepted as concern for her safety. "I'll tell Isabella," she threatened, backing toward the door. "I'll tell the school board. Everyone will know what you really are." His movement was so fast she didn't see it coming. Suddenly he was there, his hand around her throat, his familiar cologne suffocating her. "No one would believe you," he whispered. "The desperate single mother seducing a respected doctor. Think about your career, Emma. Think about Sophie." When he released her, she ran. The hotel security cameras caught her flight through the lobby, mascara streaked down her face. Dr. King emerged minutes later, his tie perfectly straight, his doctor's mask firmly back in place. That night, alone in her apartment, Emma began to plan her escape. She downloaded all their text messages, gathered receipts for his gifts, took photos of the bruises forming on her neck. Her journal entry from that night, later found by detectives, showed her growing clarity. How did I not see it? Every gift was a chain, every gesture of protection another bar in my cage. But I won't let him trap my child the way he trapped me. I won't let my baby grow up watching their mother disappear. The next day, Emma didn't show up for work. Dr. King arrived at Rosewood Elementary to find her classroom dark, her desk cleared. His calls went straight to voicemail. The tracking app showed her phone was off. For the first time in their relationship, she had slipped his control. What he didn't know was that Emma had fled to her parents' house, finally telling them everything. Her father, the retired cop who had taught her about dignity and self-respect, held her while she cried. Her mother, who had watched helplessly as her daughter disappeared into Dr. King's web, was already calling lawyers. But Dr. King had not maintained his power for so long by being careless. Within hours of discovering her absence, he began his counterattack. Anonymous calls to the school board questioned Emma's professional conduct. Rumors about her mental stability began circulating among parents. Her private bank account, the one he had helped her set up, was suddenly frozen due to suspicious activity. The final confrontation was inevitable. On a rainy Friday evening, Dr. King appeared at her parents' house, his Tesla parked on the quiet street, Schwark, his medical bag in hand, looking every inch the concerned friend coming to help. But Emma, watching through the window, finally saw him for what he was, a predator who had mistaken her for easy prey. When he rang the doorbell, she was ready. The recording app on her phone was running, capturing every word as he alternated between threats and promises, between rage and manipulation. What he didn't know was that her father was in the next room, listening, his hands clenched into fists. What none of them knew was that this confrontation would set in motion the final, fatal chapter of their story. "You have until Monday to come back," he said finally, his voice carrying that familiar note of absolute authority. "After that, I can't protect you anymore." Emma's response was clear and steady. "I don't need your protection. I never did." As she watched him drive away, Emma felt a mixture of terror and triumph. She had broken free, but at what cost? The baby she carried, meant to be a symbol of hope, now felt like a ticking clock. She had just days to figure out how to protect herself and her children from a man who had spent a year proving he would stop at nothing to maintain control. Monday would come too soon, bringing with it a violence that would shock even hardened detectives. But for that moment, standing in her parents' doorway, with one hand on her stomach and the other holding Sophie close, Emma Carter allowed herself to feel something she hadn't experienced in months: freedom. Monday, February 5th, dawned cold and gray in Los Angeles. Emma Carter woke early in her parents' house, kissed her sleeping daughter goodbye, and drove back to her apartment to gather more clothes. She had already decided, after meeting with her lawyer that afternoon, she would never return to Rosewood Elementary. The pregnancy test and documentation of Dr. Nathaniel King's abuse were safely stored in her mother's safe. What Emma didn't know was that she would never make that lawyer's appointment. The security cameras in her apartment complex captured Dr. King's Tesla entering the parking garage at 8:15 a.m. He had used his copy of her key card, one he'd insisted on having for emergencies. In his medical bag, alongside his stethoscope and prescription pad, was a pair of latex gloves and a syringe filled with a lethal cocktail of drugs from his practice. Emma found him waiting in her living room, sitting in the expensive armchair he'd given her last Christmas. "I thought we should talk privately," he said, his voice carrying that familiar note of authority that had once made her feel safe. One last time. The next-door neighbor would later tell police she heard raised voices around 9 a.m. By then, Emma had revealed her hand, the documented threats, the photos of bruises, the recorded conversations. Most damaging of all, the pregnant pause when she mentioned going to the medical board about his pattern of pursuing young mothers at his practice. "You've been careful," she said, her voice steady despite her fear. "But you've made mistakes. Other women have come forward. They just needed someone to listen." The security footage showed Dr. King's perfect facade cracking. His hands slammed against the wall, inches from her face. "You think you can threaten me?" he sneered. "Everything you have, everything you are, I gave you. I can take it all away." But Emma wasn't the same woman who had fallen for his manipulations a year ago. "No," she replied, one hand protectively over her stomach. "You didn't give me anything. You used gifts as chains. You called control protection. You turned love into a prison. But I'm done being afraid of you." What happened next was pieced together by forensics experts. The struggle began in the living room. Overturned furniture, broken pictures, the shattered remains of the vase he'd given her for her birthday. It ended in the kitchen, where Emma had tried to reach her phone. The neighbor reported hearing a scream cut short around 9:30 a.m. Dr. King's medical training made the end quick, if not merciful. The syringe contained a lethal dose of drugs that would initially look like a heart attack. He arranged her body carefully, staging evidence of a tragic accident. His hands never shook. The same steady fingers that had performed countless pediatric examinations now erased evidence of his crime. The first sign that something was wrong came when Emma didn't pick up Soap Sophie from her parents' house that evening. Linda Carter, mother's intuition screaming, called the police. Officers found Emma's body at 8 p.m., looking peaceful, except for the bruises hidden under her collar. King was in surgery when the police arrived at his practice, saving the life of a child with appendicitis. His performance was flawless, his concern for his patient genuine. But in his pocket, his phone buzzed constantly with texts from his wife, Isabella. The police were at their house asking questions about his relationship with Emma Carter. The school community's reaction was immediate and devastating. Rosewood Elementary closed for a week. Parents who had trusted Dr. King with their children's health recoiled in horror. His own children, Ethan and Mia, watched their perfect family image shatter as details emerged in the press. The evidence mounted quickly. Security footage showed his car entering and leaving Emma's complex. The syringe was found in a dumpster 3 blocks away. His fingerprints, preserved by the latex gloves, were disposed of separately. Most damning of all was Emma's journal, discovered in her mother's safe, along with the pregnancy test and photos documenting months of abuse. Detective Olivia Martinez, lead investigator, would later describe the case as one of the most methodically documented domestic abuse situations she'd ever seen. Emma knew he might kill her. Martina told reporters she left breadcrumbs everywhere, making sure that if something happened to her, he wouldn't get away with it. 4-year-old Sophie, too young to understand why mommy wasn't coming home, drew picture after picture of her mother in bright colors. Her grandmother hung each one on the refrigerator next to the last family photo taken before Emma met Dr. King, a reminder of happier times, of a young mother's smile untouched by fear. The arrest came days after the murder. Dr. King was in the middle of his morning rounds, visiting sick children with the same gentle bedside manner that had fooled so many for so long. The officers waited until he finished with his last patient, one final act of consideration for the innocent. The security cameras captured his walk of shame through the hospital, still wearing his white coat, hands cuffed behind his back. Isabella King filed for divorce the next day. Their children withdrew from Rosewood Elementary, unable to face their classmates. The prestigious practice he had built crumbled as parents transferred their children's care elsewhere. His carefully constructed world collapsed like a house of cards in a storm. The school held a memorial service in the art room where Emma had once taught. Her students' artwork still hung on the walls, bright splashes of color that seemed to mock the somber occasion. Maria Martinez, who had tried to warn her friend about Dr. King, spoke through tears about Emma's passion for teaching and love for her daughter. In the days that followed, more victims came forward. Other young mothers from his practice, previous teachers from other schools, each with a similar story of manipulation, control, and narrowly avoided tragedy. The pattern stretched back years, hidden behind his reputation and power. Sophie moved in with her grandparents, her room filled with her mother's paintings and her own artwork. She still asked for Uncle Nathaniel sometimes, too young to understand the complex tragedy that had stolen her mother. The trust fund he had set up for her education was frozen, along with all his assets, pending the criminal investigation. The final piece of evidence was found in Dr. King's private study, a laptop containing folders of surveillance photos, recorded conversations, and detailed notes about Emma and other women. It revealed a predator's methodology, a carefully crafted system for identifying, isolating, and controlling vulnerable young mothers. A month after Emma's death, spring arrived at Rosewood Elementary. New artwork appeared on the walls of what had been her classroom, created by students still trying to process their loss. In the school garden, a memorial bench was installed bearing a plaque with words from Emma's journal. "Art is how we decorate our lives with love." The tragedy changed policies at schools across Los Angeles. Background checks became more rigorous. Relationships between board members and staff were more carefully monitored. But for those who knew Emma Carter, the dedicated teacher, the loving mother, the woman who finally found the courage to break free, these changes came too late. In her last journal entry, found by detectives, Emma had written, If anything happens to me, tell Sophie that her mommy was brave. Tell her I chose to fight rather than let fear win. And tell her to keep painting because that's how we keep love alive. By March, the case of Dr. Nathaniel King had shattered the carefully maintained illusions of Los Angeles' elite social circles. His arrest for the murder of Emma Carter wasn't just another crime. It was a revelation that forced an entire community to confront the darkness they had ignored in their midst. The investigation, led by Detective Olivia Martinez, uncovered a pattern spanning more than 15 years. Dr. King's private study, which his wife Isabella had never been allowed to enter, became a crime scene that revealed the true extent of his predatory behavior. Meticulously labeled folders contained surveillance photos, personal information, and detailed notes on dozens of women, teachers, nurses, single mothers who had brought their children to his practice. It was like finding a serial killer's trophy room. Detective Martinez would later testify, except instead of physical trophies, he collected lives. He documented every manipulation, every gift, every threat. He treated it like a science. Isabella King, speaking publicly for the first time since her husband's arrest, appeared on national television looking decades older than her years. "I thought I was living the perfect life," she said, her voice breaking. "While I was saving lives at the hospital, my husband was destroying them. How do you ever recover from that kind of betrayal?" Their children, Ethan and Mia, faced their own nightmare. Ethan withdrew from his pre-med program at UCLA, unable to face a future in medicine. Mia, who had spent hours in Emma's art classroom, suffered panic attacks when she realized how her father had used her to get close to her teacher. Both teenagers required intensive therapy to process their father's true nature. The most heartbreaking impact was on 4-year-old Sophie Carter. Child psychologists worked carefully with her, using art therapy to help her process her loss. Her drawings told the story she couldn't verbalize, bright, happy pictures of her mother, suddenly interrupted by dark scribbles and torn paper. The trust fund Dr. King had set up for her education was transferred to a victims' compensation account, managed by her grandparents. Throughout the spring, more victims came forward. Olivia Chen, a kindergarten teacher from his children's elementary school, Maria Ramirez, a young nurse who had worked in his practice, and Jennifer Thompson, another single mother who had barely escaped his manipulation. In each story, the pattern followed: professional mentorship turning to financial control, isolation from friends and family, and eventually threats when they tried to break free. The prestigious Beverly Hills practice he had built crumbled within weeks. Parents withdrew their children in droves, horrified to realize they had trusted their kids to a predator. The medical board launched an investigation into every aspect of his practice, uncovering irregularities in prescription records that suggested he had been stockpiling the drugs that ultimately killed Emma. Rosewood Elementary became ground zero for a broader conversation about power dynamics in educational institutions. The board underwent a complete overhaul. New policies were implemented across the district, requiring transparent documentation of all interactions between board members and staff. The art room where Emma had taught was renamed the Carter Memorial Arts Center, dedicated to fostering creativity and emotional healing. Linda Carter, Emma's mother, channeled her grief into action. Using the documentation her daughter had left behind, she established the Emma Carter Foundation, dedicated to helping single mothers recognize and escape abusive relationships. The foundation's first initiative was a scholarship program for children who had lost parents to domestic violence. In June, as Dr. King awaited trial, a storage unit rented under one of his shell companies was discovered. Inside, investigators found more evidence of his calculating nature: books on psychological manipulation, surveillance equipment, and, most disturbingly, draft plans for dealing with problematic attachments. Emma's name was on the most recent list. The trial began in September, drawing national attention. The prosecution's case was built not just on physical evidence, but on the testimony of women whose lives Dr. King had almost destroyed. Each day, more details emerged about how he had used his position, wealth, and influence to create a hunting ground for vulnerable women. Isabella King filed for divorce and moved across the country with their children, changing their last name to her maiden name. Ethan and Mia struggled to rebuild their lives. haunted by memories of how their father had used them in his schemes. Mia's art therapy sessions produced paintings that mirrored Sophie's, bright colors overwhelmed by darkness. The community's reckoning went beyond the immediate tragedy. Other powerful figures faced increased scrutiny. Educational institutions across the country reviewed their policies on professional boundaries. The case became a cautionary tale about how predators could hide behind respectability and success. Sophie Carter's future became a central concern for everyone touched by the case. A trust was established in her name, funded by donations from the community and proceeds from the sale of her mother's artwork. Emma's final paintings, found in her apartment, were exhibited at a local gallery, with all proceeds going to domestic violence prevention programs. 1 year after Emma's death, the Rosewood Elementary community gathered in the Carter Memorial Arts Center. Sophie, now 5, helped unveil a mosaic created by students past and present. At its center was a portrait of her mother, surrounded by the bright colors and hopeful images that had characterized her teaching style. Dr. King was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. In December, his final statement to the court showed no remorse, only anger at being caught. The perfect facade had crumbled completely, revealing the monster beneath. The legacy of Emma Carter's tragic death continued to ripple through Los Angeles society. Her journal, published with her parents' permission, became required reading in courses on domestic violence prevention. Her story saved lives as women recognized their own situations in her words and found the courage to seek help. Every year on the anniversary of her death, the Carter Memorial Art Center hosts an exhibition of student artwork dedicated to themes of hope and survival. In a corner of the gallery, permanently displayed, is Emma's final unfinished painting, a canvas of blue and gold that speaks of dreams interrupted but not forgotten. Sophie Carter grew up surrounded by her mother's art and love, protected by a community determined to honor Emma's memory. The tragedy that claimed her mother's life became a catalyst for change, a reminder that sometimes the most dangerous predators are the ones who appear most respectable. The case of Dr. Nathaniel King and Emma Carter became more than just another tragic headline. It became a watershed moment, forcing society to confront uncomfortable truths about power, privilege, and the masks that predators wear. In the end, Emma's greatest legacy was not just the art she created or the students she inspired, but the lives saved by the truth she died exposing.